Welcome, y'all. Happy Saturday night, hopefully night, depending on where you're at. My name's Sean. I'm Sean Mays, and it's great to be here again this week for part two of our two sessions that we've had for celebrating Black History Month, and particularly celebrating the contributions of our Black members of Muse and celebrating Blackness as a whole in our music theater industry as well. And tonight I'm really excited to be able to share the stage with three of the most contributing foundational members of, I think, music and music theater, certainly as far as on the scene today and for the last number of years as well. Daryl Waters, Joseph Joubert, and Zane Mark. And part of this panel, which was kind of cool this evening, is the idea for this came from a chapter that is featured in a book called Reframing the Musical that was published about 4 years ago now, of which I was fortunate to be a contributor in terms of writing one chapter in this book. I'm going to post a link. There's a link, a Google Books link, if you're interested in actually pulling the book up. And I think actually a good deal of the book you can actually read online, particularly the chapter that we're going to be talking about. But the chapter that I wrote was entitled Black Conductors Make History on the Great White Way, the Lost Labors of the Music Director in Musical Theater. And so the chapter, all of the chapters in the book, Reframing the Musical, as you can guess, looked at recentering the way that we look at the musical, and particularly in looking at it from any angle that isn't largely male, largely white. And so there are a lot of contributions in different capacities on that end. And so the chapter, if you read it in more explicit detail, starts from the seed of thought from an article that was published in 2014. And the article in 2014 is talking about Black conductors making history on the Great White Way. And this article featured these four gentlemen. The only one that we're missing tonight is Shelton Becton, who is also one of our founding members here at Muse. And the article talks specifically about the fact that this was the first time in, as far as we know, as far as in Broadway history, in 2014, that four Black conductors were leading orchestras on Broadway all at the same time. And I'm actually going to post, there's different versions of this as well in terms of this article that exists online. This is a version from the New Pittsburgh Courier as well. There's a couple different versions BET has, all in slight different forms, and they share a lot in terms of also talking about their careers, the careers of the four men and the three men that we have here tonight too. So to start off, thank you so much, Daryl, Joseph, Zane, for your time tonight. And in keeping in our, trying to look at specifically this month and consider this month in February, the three of you, again, are really foundational members to not only Black musical theater, but musical theater in general, as far as talking about kind of the leading music teams. And so I'm curious, maybe as a way of getting started, we'll come back to that article in a moment, but could you start by sharing just like the briefest sense, combo question here, maybe how you got your start in the business, but thinking more specifically, who is your first Black mentor in this business? And how musically, and how did that, or I mean, it could be non-musically too, but thinking probably musically, who is the first Black mentor that you had? And how did that shape and inform your work and what you wanted to do as a result in this career? Zane, go for it.
My father was a musician, so anything that he did, I was always tagging around trying to find out what was going on. But as far as Broadway was concerned, my father's first Broadway show was here. And I think right after that, well, he did a couple of shows that called me during, but right after that, he got a call to do a show called Bubbling Brown Sugar. And in Bubbling Brown Sugar, I met a guy named Danny Holgate. So outside of my father, Danny Holgate was my first major mentor. And I copied music under Danny. He gave me some piano. There was a lot of stuff that I learned, but finding out like how the sausage is actually made behind the curtain and seeing what's going on is a big deal. And, I was in high school, so not many high school students are going to be able to sit inside a big band, a real big band, and hear that and the sheer power of 12 horns hitting you. And so that was a major experience for me. And that was my first inroads to Broadway. Short and sweet.
I also, Danny Holgate was my, inroads into it as well. But my time goes back a little bit further to when I was still in Cleveland. I had not even moved to New York yet. And I was doing a lot of musical theater, but, it was just kind of like just something fun to do. And I was getting paid. I was doing a lot of summer theater as well. But then I came to New York, and my first show that I saw was Don't Bother Me, I Can't Cope, that Danny Holgate had music directed and arranged. And it really was eye-opening for me, because all of a sudden I'm seeing like all these people of color on the stage. I'm seeing this band that's led by this person of color. And then I moved to New York, and I got in touch with Danny, and he really helped me, because I'm struggling. I'm trying to figure out, how does this business really work? And like Zane said, you sit inside of all of this, and kind of like you kind of get it through osmosis, just because you're right in the middle of it all. And also he gave me a lot of gigs. It's I work with Cab Calloway because Danny needed somebody to cover for him. So it was that kind of mentoring experience that kept me alive until I could actually make my own way here. And again, as I've said recently quite a few times, thank you, Danny Holgate.
Wow, cool. So my first show was in 1983, Amen Corner, and I worked under Margaret Harris, who you guys have talked about before. She was one of really 3 Black conductors that we had at the time. She wasn't so much a mentor, but it was just the experience of me being a young 25-year-old and seeing a Black conductor, because that's just there weren't many of them, so that was a great experience. But I also met the composer colorist Taylor Perkinson, I guess in around 1984, and that was a transformative meeting, because he just an evening with him, and I think he, at the time, it wasn't so much that it was the Broadway influence, it was the influence. He was a major figure. I think he had the Barbara McNair show. He had the orchestrations for Sidney Poitier movies.
Let's not forget all the Marvin Gaye stuff.
Yeah, so it was transformative. That, and then so Margaret Harris, Harold, Carlos Taylor Perkins, and then Linda Twine really is my main mentor. She took me under her wings, I guess around 85, 86, and I would sub for her at Big River. And just watching her, again, another Black conductor, musical director. So I had, I was just real fortunate to be under some heavyweight wings per se. I met Harold Wheeler somewhere around that time, and he had me come, and I was able to watch him work at All My Children. He was doing recording sessions, so he let me come and see that. So that was another, giant, so I was real fortunate to have those early influences on my musical growth.
Very cool. So we see this influence as far as mentorship, which is something massive we've been talking about, and how important that is, and particularly in terms of a lot of the work that Muse has been doing over the last couple of years since being founded now. And I want to fast forward back to the article. So the article comes out 2014 and is talking about saying, for the first time, there's four Black conductors leading Broadway orchestras. Can you share a bit about where you were at, like what you were working on at the time, and Zane, Joseph, I mean, you were definitely both interviewed. If you read through the article, there's some thoughts from both of you, and I'm curious we'll come to a moment of talking about that then compared to now. But for the 3 of you, I'd be very interested to hear what where were you at? What were you working on? And what were your thoughts when, how did that whole article come to exist? How were you contacted about it? And what were your thoughts? And what were your thoughts about on, oh, I think I see.
You know, the photographer, James, the guy that took the picture, reached out, and I think he was trying to get a whole bunch of people of color to be in the picture, and we were trying to find Linda, but we couldn't get her. I think Jason was trying to call Jason. We couldn't find him. So the four of us showed up. I, at the time, was working on a show called Holler If You Hear Me. But I also had dance music arrangements in the show that Joseph was doing, Motown. And my wife was doing, what's the show, Daryl, that you were doing?
Oh, After Midnight.
Yeah, she was doing that. And my daughter was in Motown. So I kid you not, I came outside and James wanted to take some pictures of me in front of my marquee. And I'm looking up, and you know, Times Square, you got all, and I can see the advertisements for all of the shows that my family was represented in at that time. And I'm going, talk about being blessed. You know what I'm saying? Just me personally, my family, and then the four of us. That's a big deal for me. And then a real quick story. The woman that was in charge of hair at the time, her son wanted to be a musician, just vague musician. And she called me in weeks later and said, check this out. My son wants to talk to you. And, you know, people say, well, it'd be good to see, you know, Black people taking a picture and, you know, showing that we actually, and he said, after I saw the picture, I knew what I wanted to do and I knew I was capable of doing it. And this kid was in junior high school. She said he had the picture blown up and put it on his bedroom wall. And so what do you say to that? You know, all right, I'm done.
He just said I was at Motown, and I can't remember. I couldn't remember if it was Linda. I know James Alexander, you know, the photographer, wanted us to get together. I think, and maybe Linda Twine was involved in trying to spearhead some part of it, but it was just this coincidence. I mean, it's a rare moment in time, you know, being at Motown, and you know, and Zane was the dance arranger for that. His daughter Crystal was in the show, and then around the corner he was MDing, and then Daryl Waters, you know, was literally around the corner at another theater. So it was, and then Shelton Beckton, he was not here, was doing, was it Lady Day at the time? No, he was.
Yes.
That was Lady Day.
So it was just this rare moment, and I never forget, I guess we were in between shows, and we stood in between traffic trying to take a picture when the cars were coming. We would wait for the stop sign, you know, to come, and we to stand there and pose and smile and then try to get out of traffic. But it was a cathartic moment, just, you know, and it hadn't happened till maybe recently. I mean, we had maybe one or two scattered ones, but not four. And I think maybe recently we had three, or because I was doing Caroline, and then Jason was conducting Michael Jackson, and then Alvin is at Tina. So I mean, again, it was, and then Kenny Seymour is at Ain't Too Proud. So
Ain't Too Proud.
We've overlapped a few times, but it's rare, and it's a shame that is the case. But we have to celebrate the moment anyway, and just, you know, hope that it was able, you know, some other little, as Zane said, some young, you know, kid could have seen that, and that could be an example, because you know, when I was coming up, there were just, you know, the few, you know, that we talked about, very rare.
And I was doing After Midnight, which, you know, I actually don't do a lot of music direction in terms of, you know, being in the pit and conducting. I absolutely wanted to do this one. It was just, you know, a blast of a show to do. You know, Wynton Marsalis was basically my boss. But, you know, it was just a great group of musicians and a great group of performers doing wonderful music. But I remember from that period that when James first approached me about this, I really was surprised to hear that, you know, this was the first time that they had four conductors on Broadway. And, you know, so of course, you know, it was a major honor. But, you know, the bigger thing I remember from that period is that as fun as After Midnight was, it was also short. It's like, you know, our show, I think that most of the time I would see Joseph at intermission of his show when our show was over. So I was very happy to have the much shorter show. All right.
Yeah, Yeah, Motown was a long one. Yeah.
I, Daryl, you sort of touched on this in your answer a bit, but saying that this was, you know, you were a bit surprised that this was that in hearing that this was the first time that that was the case. You know, Joseph Zane, was that a similar, like, were you also similarly like
Yep, I
surprised
mean,
by that news, or what was, do you remember what your reaction
it's a
was?
small business. We all know each other, and I guess we're the clique that if you know we pass the work on and say, well, I can't do it. Can you know Zane, can you? But Daryl, can you do it? So we know we all knew each other. So it's like we know when we're working, when we're not working. So I mean, we know when there's you know no blacks on Broadway. And again, like Daryl says, we all do different things. I mean, Zane is a dance arranger as well. I'm an orchestrator, musical supervisor. I mean, so we wear these different hats. So there are times when I'm not you know, MDing, I'm orchestrating or I'm music supervising. So we know when we're working. So it was just this rare moment. And like I said, now we have another generation that has come up from our mentoring that are sort of taking on, but it's still, you can count on your hands. It's still not something that we're making a big breakthrough, but it is big. I mean, it's more than it you know, than one. So which, you know, again, so it's just this rare moment but we know when it happens and it hasn't, I don't recall it being since then at the same time, you know, maybe you guys remember some other.
I just remember when I first started, you know, getting involved when we did Bubbling Brown Sugar, the Wiz was literally around the corner. And so those were the two. But then after that, there was like Timbuktu, Amos Behave, and there was a whole bunch of Black shows that were coming up. But not all of them had Black people in the pit, and not all of them had Black conductors, and on and on and on and on. But for me, I was so like immersed in Bubbling Brown Sugar that I couldn't see. So when Danny moved on to Cope and all these other shows, I just moved with them and doing the copying, never thinking that, why aren't there more people of color around here? You know, so, and just to touch on something else that Joseph said, when I watched Danny work, Danny did and could do everything. And I think most of us can kind of do that also, whether we choose to do it or not. But back in the day when I first started, you had to be able to play the piano, orchestrate, arrange, vocals, band, everything. And that was just what it is. I guess, Daryl, you talked to maybe a little more than me, like music assistants. You don't know damn music assistants. We didn't even know to ask for a music assistant. We just did everything because we had to, you know, and I'm sure most of us didn't get compensated properly because that's just what we did. We didn't know any better. So now that, you know, things are changing and we are opening our eyes a little bit more to what should be, and we're lucky enough to be able to spread that information on to the other folks that we're mentoring and coming up behind us, the way people did for me and for us.
Very cool. We're sort of
John, let
touching.
me ask you a question. Do you actually have a mentor here?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, certainly in some capacity. I think like it's interesting to think about lineage. Like I'll talk about this with Jason, for instance, here at MJ, right? And even just like being in the room with him, and we had a conversation to that effect of like, and of course Joubert, you know, like Joseph being his mentor as well, right? So talking about that sort of lineage of working, and that's something that, you know, even especially prior to, you know, I've been in New York, what, 5 years now, but prior to that time, you know, I never worked with a music director who was, you know, I mean, as a Black man, period, let alone like even as, you know, a person of color. And that came from me like being regionally all the way across Canada to doing work through the UK on the West End, touring in the West End, right? You know, doing regional work in the States. So it is interesting, and I think it's an interesting thing, even just like considering, you know, we talk a lot about this, and we're very New York centered right here too, right? Even talking about all of us as far as and Alvin and Jason and Michael, and you know, some of the, in terms of the crew here, but also considering like further to that, what does that mean as far as mentorship goes, particularly on the outskirts of of New York, right? Looking everywhere else and being like, how do we still ensure that, someone halfway across the country can take a look at that picture and blow that picture up and still be like, and it's not just enough to also look at the picture on the wall, right? We have to have that human connection as well. But I would say that, like Jason, Alvin, like they're, all Michael, all big brothers, right? For sure.
So you are the next generation, absolutely.
Truly, right? And it's a cool thing to start to, and as far as like in terms of looking up, I mean, Zane, like, I mean, all three of you I've spoken to at different points, right? In terms of my time of being here in different capacities, right? I remember meeting all individually and talking all individually too, right? So again, I think it speaks a lot to how important the network is, right? And especially in this context, right? Knowing your people and finding your people as well. Because that was certainly a driving force for me.
Okay, is everybody else still here?
Oh,
what did you say?
We lost you for a second.
Oh boy.
I lost
Yeah, just saying to the same effect. But yeah, talking about how important that was to know your people too as well. And that was a driving force for me in being like, oh yeah, there is a place for me in this industry, right? And a lot of times where I'd get into rooms and be like, people would be like, well, people didn't see the things that I could do in the same way that I knew in talking with, for instance, the three of you, or even some of the others, that they would be like, oh yeah, like we know where you need to be and we'll help you get there, right? So it's really, really important, right? We're sort of sliding into a conversation around wearing many hats, talking about the role, right? The roles that and how being MD, orchestrator, arranger, dance arranger, right? Like all of the, like, so many, like massive umbrella, right? I'm curious how, and this is something that we talk about in the book too, in terms of like looking at the role of the MD and how a lot of those extra pieces can often be forgotten, right? In terms of just doing that extra little piece here and there, and it gets done, but it's like we don't necessarily, like, in terms of creative teams, and even as like being on a marquee, right? We know who the directors are, we know who the choreographers are. They're always big and blown up on the outside of theaters. And the conductor is the person who is the one member of the creative team who stays with the show after and has to maintain that integrity. And so I'm curious from all three of you, how is the role of being like the music person, being, we can use music director as like a blanket term, but how has that role shifted in the time since you started and up until now? And how has it grown? Has it shrunk? Has it, like, that work become more spread out? I'm curious for your thoughts on that.
I'm trying to think. I mean, when I think about my first show, it's interesting. I was a piano player, but they wound up using some of my licks in the orchestration. But I always wanted to arrange, so I wasn't really the arranger, but I kind of was, so you're involved in it. But the orchestrator would do the orchestration work, and I mean, I don't know that it's shifted. It certainly has become something that we all just wound up doing everything. I mean, we want, if we're music supervising something, we wind up arranging it, and often orchestrating it. So it's because I think it maybe the idea is that not everyone can do that, but oftentimes, maybe because we're from an older school of work, we grew up having to just be knowledgeable about all that. But I would say that it's not something that everyone does. I mean, some people just conduct, some people just orchestrate that, so it doesn't shift. But I think it's a maybe we can like tap ourselves and show that we grew up in a time where we had to just be able to do everything. So we're in that different kind of a clique of that realm. Am I making sense?
And if I could just kind of dovetail on that, I think that actually would be the change. And it's not just with Black musical directors, it's just with everybody. When I first started, there was no such thing as a musical director and a musical supervisor. It was just one person that did everything. And so I think now things are becoming more specialized. There was no dance music arranger before, and the supervisor was like a cat that wanted to be in charge but didn't want to be there and conduct the show every day, or so yeah, like Daryl. So that's why me and Daryl work well. He'll do the work and I'll stay in the trenches with everybody, and I dig it. Kind of like what we're doing now. So but I think that might be the big change. That there is a vocal arranger, there is a dance arranger, there's an orchestrator, there's all of these different people doing all of this different work. The whole job of a copyist, and where does that gray line work between the orchestrator that's probably orchestrating in finale or Sibelius, and then you give the file to the copyist? Well, who did all the damn work in the first place? And how to, what I'm saying? So there's a whole lot of stuff. But I think if there is something that's a major change, is that things are more specialized. So this specialist comes in and does it. This specialist comes in and does that.
For me, the biggest change is not so much the duties, but the workload. I mean, in this technological age, it's like everything has to happen quicker and better. So you have no choice but to have hopefully have different people to come in and help you, because the time is just so compressed. That there's no way to get it done and get sleep. It's just not possible.
And Daryl still hasn't figured out how to get it done and get sleep. So he doesn't sleep. There's some vampire thing going on up in Harlem with him.
I tell folk I enjoy the outcome. I hate the process. I just finished literally 2 weeks of intense, like everyday scoring. But as I got older, I got to get sleep. So I mean, I may stop at 12 and start back at 10 in the morning. But I mean, it's just that intense. You're in that zone and you got to churn it out and then you just drop. You're like, oh my God, it's done. But then then you have to tweak more. But it's we're cursed with wanting to do this. But I personally don't enjoy the process. I really enjoy the outcome more so. So I mean, I just dread like the beginning of that whole thing.
That's interesting. You all speak a bit about this idea of like the old school sort of establishing that you had to do everything right, and I like, it's very interesting even in some of the work that I do. Like people are always like, well, how do you, like, why as a you music direct, but you also do like orchestrations and arrangements? Because I think in our current like landscape, like that's really not, as you say, necessarily expected, right? That you have all of those skill sets. And so like a question I have for you, just even if we kind of center that musically, like, do you think that's something that all music directors on the block, like kind of here, there, everywhere, need to be able to do? What's your take in terms of that? Like for myself as a musician, I think it's like, it's certainly shaped the way I think about music, right? Being able to have those different skills and a knowledge of vocal work, a knowledge of how to do instrumental arranging and the like. But I'm curious as to, I think that based upon all of your careers, you've all done some really, really cool stuff that has really been a result of the vastness of your abilities. And I'm kind of curious as to, did those mentors, like, is that how you learned how to orchestrate and do that work when you came into it? What was that scope like as you started in the business? What was your first thing? And then you're like, okay, I had to add on learning. I didn't know vocals, but I had to add on learning how to vocal arrange. Or I'm curious for your thoughts on that.
Well, like I've told the story many a time. I would watch Danny write his charts, and I saw what happened on Broadway. But the big lesson was when it had to get reduced to go out to the bus and truck. And bus and truck is literally a bus and a truck that drags the whole show across the town. And it's usually a much scaled down version. So it might be rhythm section and 4 horns as opposed to 12. And how he would reduce it and still make it sound like something. And that was like, ooh. And so, and something else you mentioned about things changing. And Daryl mentioned it too. Everybody wants everything yesterday and it has to be faster and done faster. And do you benefit by knowing how to do all of these things? And I would say yes. Like if you bought a house, you don't necessarily have to be a plumber or an electrician, but you need to know what the plumber's doing, or you're going to get charged up the kazoo because he took 2 screws out and put 2 screws back in and charge you $1 billion for that. And you go, wait, dude, that was just 2 screws. What's all this about? So now when you're going to orchestrators, that guys do this on a regular, you hear a flute part, and then right after that, you hear a bass clarinet part. where you have to allow the guy a chance to take the flute, put it down, pick up the bass clarinet and go. He can't make that move in 2 minutes. You have to know this, and it's just not going to happen otherwise. So just watching this, knowing this, experiencing this, or I want the singer to do this, but they can't do that if the choreographer has them dancing and flipping and spinning and twirling. And so eventually you just experience just tells you, that's not going to happen. We have to come up with a plan B because of this. So the more you know about everything, and that's lighting, everything, the better and smoother everything is going to move around you. And it's constantly changing. So, the more you know, the better. But that's not just this realm here. That's in life. So it's good for us to know a little about everything. Jack of all trades, master of none.
It's funny, you were asking like the experiences. I mean, you grow up, at least for me, I grew up in church, so I was always working with choirs. So then, working with singers, and then, you get a show and you got to work with singers, and then the orchestra is another thing. So there's the idea of knowing the instruments and knowing what they sound like, how they blend, and to be able to conduct. So it's a real process. And the more, like I said, the more you evolve into this, this musician, whatever, orchestrator. But I mean, I can't imagine a musical director that wouldn't want to know about orchestration. I mean, you're just going to take a score from an orchestrator, and you got to know what it looks like, what it sounds like. You got to have an idea what the instruments are, and so forth. So I think it's to your benefit to have all these skills. I mean, you don't have to be a great arranger to be a musical director, but I think you had to have some knowledge, because you're there with the singers. If you have to adjust something, how can you adjust if you don't know a sense of arranging vocals? So it's I think it's the more you know, the better in that sense. So.
I'm basically just seconding what both of them said. It's, I always think of music director like I think of the director of a musical period. It's like this person, the best person for that job is not necessarily going to be able to do lighting or be able to do choreography or be able to do set design, but they know exactly what they want from those people and they know how to get it out of them. I think it's the same thing for music directors. You just have to, even if even if you are not skilled in a particular aspect of music, of the music, you still have to have some kind of working knowledge of how it works, period.
And how to explain it to the person that you need to get it from. That doesn't sound right. So what do you want me to do? And you need to be able to execute that to make it make sense.
Part of what the work in the chapter seeks to do is to kind of bring into light just how much the music director does, right? Or especially in this capacity, if you are orchestrating, if you are adding those additional elements into the creative process, right? And kind of revisiting this idea of the director of a musical, the choreographer of a musical, that name is often displayed in big lights on the outside of a theater. Not often the case with the music director. Sometimes even like a composer, right? That can be a harder thing to press, which is interesting considering that we are a musical art. Is that a statement that resonates with you? Do you think that has the appreciation of the contribution of like the MD increased over time? Has it gotten more forgotten? Have you experienced any sort of form of that in your careers, or does any part of that resonate with you three?
I think we all could talk about the experiences that we can't talk about on this panel right now. Just in the past, I'll just be generic about it. But yes, it's happened where even as a musical director, you don't get the same respect that the choreographer gets. So you wind up having to fight for your time, even for working with the singers to polish stuff. Because it's always about the acting or about the choreography. So I mean, we go through that all the time. But in terms of credit, I think you just have to have a good lawyer to make sure that you get the right fonts and everything on the billboard. Otherwise, they will forget you. Because it just it's even with movies. You see a movie, you hear a movie score, and you think about all the people that are involved in that soundtrack. and they don't, often you just see the, the composer's name, but what about the incredible musicians that made that score sound so incredible that you watched that made, gave you this feeling, so, there's so many things we could talk about in terms of credit that musicians usually just don't get. We're bottom of the totem pole often, but we have to fight for it. That's all I can say.
And I also, I'm
even,
sorry, good, Daryl.
Even, let's start with the audition process. It's like having to fight for singers in a musical, as a music director. It's and I shouldn't say fight, it's all a negotiation, of course, but it starts there, and you have to somehow, you have to find some way to make sure that people understand that what you're doing is absolutely just as important as what they're doing, because everybody, the choreographer, of course, wants the best dancers. The director wants the best actors. So you just have to step up there too. Unfortunately, we can only do so much. There are ongoing discussions. And it's, the great thing about social media is how many groups are starting to take this whole thing on, about the fact that we don't really get the respect that we should get in print. That's been encouraging to me.
I think the other problem, and it's a major problem, is people just don't know. When you pull a rabbit out of your butt, and I've watched Daryl do this overnight on this particular project what I'm doing now. When someone says, I need X to happen, and X is a big ass deal. It's a lot of work, and that person goes home, Daryl Waters, and spends the whole night rewriting the entire chart, getting it to a copyist, getting them to finish the part up and have parts at 10 o'clock in the morning. And they go, yeah, never mind. They just don't understand. I had a conversation with Harold Wheeler talking about orchestrations and arrangement. How come those aren't or weren't at the time Tony Award winning categories? And he's like, the board doesn't know what that means. They don't understand what that job is. I sat in a audience of a Broadway show, a straight play, with the producer sitting right next to me. And he said, are you Zane, Mark? And I'm like, yeah. He said, didn't you work on it? I said, yeah, I did the dance arrangements for that show. This is the producer. He said, exactly what does that mean? So this is a straight play. So, he's not, but I think that level, you're supposed to know certain things. And so that's what I'm saying. If you don't know, what's the difference between an orchestrator and an arranger? And then how much of arranging and orchestrating is a musical director doing? And when you have all of these question marks and gray areas, there's going to be confusion. And if we don't step up and clarify it, and so in the midst of clarifying it, kind of what Joseph said, you kind of get your paperwork done before you start working so that everything is cool. So when you come in the room, you just work, and I don't care what needs to happen, and we're just going to work. As opposed to, well, wait a minute, those are my arrangements, those are my riffs, those are my little licks that I'm playing, like, what's happening here? Or Joseph knows what I'm talking about. There was a show that we worked on together, and the supervisor was coming in on another project that Joseph was going. But they knew that they needed Joseph, and they needed me, and they needed Jason to get this sound. And you know what I'm saying? So it's just a weird thing. And these discussions about clarifying what it is that we actually do, and I think it's only going to help. And once the clarification is there, the compensation will arise, as well as the your name on the billboard or wherever it is. They don't know. That's what I'm trying to say. They don't know.
I mean, I always, when you read a review of a show, it's like 1 out of 1,000 times that they even mention. I mean, you think about like the monumental job an orchestrator does to make the show happen, and they talk about the directing, the scenery, the actors that they didn't like this, but they never say. So every now and then, when they get something about an orchestrator. They say, oh, the dense writing or the colorful. I mean, we live for that moment because it's like they never talk about it, and that's probably what really makes our work. We think about like the hard work that you go through killing yourself for those charts, and to not get the recognition after the Zitz probe. It really makes it almost not worth it, but financially, I guess it's it's worth it. But that's the drag about it. I mean, people don't understand. They don't get it. I mean, so that's our life. That's what we're used to that. But every now and then, we get an acknowledgement, so that makes it worth the work.
To be fair, it's, part of the problem, is our own, it's just what we do. It's like, there's so much collaboration back and forth. It's like, how do you separate what, the orchestrator has done, what from the arranger, from the music director? So, I mean, it's part of it is, I don't know how we figure that part out so that so we can make it clear for people to understand.
True, but how can a show's director win best direction of a musical, and then the musical is not the best musical?
Agreed.
Or vice versa, or there's a whole bunch of things like that. So it's just, and I just go back to, they don't know, because there's no way you could have one without the other. It just doesn't make any sense. So
we won't answer it tonight.
I love it. I'm going to put this out to all of our listeners tonight. I'm going to start to slowly bring us to a conclusion. I have two more questions. One is a slightly bigger picture thing, and the other one is a short one that will bring us to hopefully a question and answer period. So if those of y'all who are listening on the call, if you have any questions, would really love, feel free to throw in the chat and populate in the meantime while we head towards that moment. And as we get towards there, I first of two questions, this one for all of you. Last week we talked a lot about, again, we spoke about Joyce Brown and Margaret Harris, right? And certainly something that is very, again, talking about how we continue to widen the playing field as far as who is our leadership, right? Who is at the top helping us to create and make decisions in this art. And this article is amazing. 2014, it's the first time when we're talking about 4 Black conductors, and all of course being male. And it was interesting in our panel last week and talking about 2 very influential conductors, people of color who were women as well. And so I guess just kind of as an all-encompassing question for the 3 of you, this is certainly, again, leading back into the work that we're doing here at Muse, and in talking about, how do we continue to find that in all sorts of diversity, not just in, not just strictly in color, although that is certainly very important, but also in terms of different identification as far as gender diversity, etc. And so I'm curious because, certainly Joyce and Margaret would have been part of your lineages. I mean, some more directly, of course, Joseph, for you with Margaret as well. But what do you think how do you think about that article, and how do you think about where we've reached now and the work that you're all 3 of you are founding members of Muse? So clearly this is something that is close to your hearts in terms of continuing to make sure that looks like. What do you think we have to do? What does the work look like? How much of that work have we done in the last couple of years since Muse has been started? What do you see as all of our responsibilities in moving forward?
At the theater, are you?
What gave it away?
All I can say is we just have to keep spreading it around. I mean, I'm just grateful that I was in a position to mentor Jason Michael Webb, Alvin Huff, Michael Mitchell, his wife Anastasia. I mean, these are people. For me, I guess everyone is different. I mean, I have a giving spirit, and for me, it's important to give back, because as much as you've been given, it comes back to you. So it was important for me to make sure that Jason conducted Color Purple before we closed. It was important for me to get Michael Mitchell to conduct Motown before, so, to get Alvin to get up. So these were, I'm just grateful for that. So that we just have to keep that lineage going. Linda Twine didn't have to give me a break. Like I said, I worked with Margaret Harris back when I was young. So, these experiences, we have to just keep that lineage going and keep following the trail. So we've done our part. It's going to be on you now to keep the next generation after for you, Sean, to keep it going, because otherwise it's not going to happen. We have to be the ones to set that trail.
I think that, certainly, Muse has been one of the most encouraging things to come along in terms of trying to, promote all kinds of diversity, but particularly, people of color. And I think that we're actually gonna see a next generation coming out of this, because we're already seeing it coming out of Muse.
And just to wrap up that question, there are a lot of people out there that we don't know about, and they might have like 75% of the qualifications to step in and do the work. The thing is, and you have to be honest with yourself, I'm not giving you my $1 million show to conduct if you don't have the experience or you don't have enough people behind you. So like, I'm involved with a project, or softly involved, where there's a person doesn't have all the experiences that they should have. And I've just taken upon myself that this person will not fail, because they can't go in and I don't want to hear, see, we gave them a shot and they messed it up. That's not happening. So Joseph can tell you, anyone that's worked in any church as the choir director plays their instrument. Whether they can read music or not, that's another song, but they can definitely play their instrument. They have to teach the band the music. So that's not a problem. Sunday is slamming. The choir needs to know the music. So they kind of know 80% of the gig already. How do we give them the rest of it? And so that, to me, I have 2 mentees from Muse that still call me after the project is done. I have 2 other mentees that are not through Muse that I'm like, wrestling, step up and doing line. And I think that's what we have to do. All of us on this call now, and I'm sure people that are listening, had people that weren't paid to help us. They just helped us. So now that we got some information, we were blessed to be in that situation. It's our responsibility to pass that along. So someone does good to me, I have to do something, and pass it along. It's a responsibility now. It's not even like I wish I could. I have to. If for no other reason that I can't allow them to fail. I can't let the buck stop here. And we can't do that now. We're not in that position. And so I think a major component of what we have to do now is each one teach one, and we have to continue that. And I'm very proud of some of the work, a lot of the work that our members are doing with employing people of color, and male, female, just non-old white men, and all sorts of positions that probably wouldn't have gotten that opportunity. So now it's our responsibility to do that. And let me hasten to add, we're not just trying to put people of color in a position. We want people of color that can handle their business and do the job. And so if we can't find them, then it's our job to try to train them and get them ready. It's a responsibility now. It's a mission statement. So we have to step up and just not lip service. We got to put some action behind it.
I love that. I love that.
Preach, Zane.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. Last question before we open up to everybody, and this is a short one. Y'all are always doing such cool stuff. Can you share a bit of what you're working on these days, or what you've just come off of? I know there's some cool stuff happening right now, / has just happened. So would be neat for everyone to know what's going down.
Oh Lord! So real quick, so I just finished Carolina Change revival. We did it with CD, which was a lot of fun. Jumped right into Tap Dance Kid at Encores, which was exciting. And I just finished orchestrating a show that's going to open at the Ford Theater called Grace, like in a couple of weeks. So my band rehearsal is on Tuesday, so my brain is fried.
Zane and I just are closing up a show called Black No More off Broadway. I'm getting ready to go into workshop for a new production of Pal Joey with Savion Glover co-directing, and hopefully later this year I'll be orchestrating for a new Susan Stroman version of New York, New York.
And can I just say, I just poked my head in. The Susan Stroman project is working in the theater at the Signature where we are. And I just heard piano and drums and saw a little bit, it was killing, just the opening. So I think that might be something to keep an eye on. Daryl mentioned that we just finished doing Black No More. So I think tomorrow's our last day. I have a project, a James Brown project that George Wolf is the supervisor for us, which is interesting. We were supposed to do Aida right before the pandemic hit us. So that's starting back up. So they're doing in rehearsals now for that. And I think next year they're supposed to start in Europe. So there's a couple other little this and a that and a this and a that. So, you know, hopefully I can keep my lights on.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you all so much for all of that, your thoughts, your time, your insight. I'd love to open it up. I see one question that's popped up, but we probably have time for just a couple, depending on how many answers we get. So if we have, we've got about 6 quick minutes. So we got a question from Jay Quinton in the chat. It says, is there anything you would say about composers who are orchestrating and music directing? And if you're here and you want to jump in and read the question as well, Quentin, you know, please feel free. Don't let me speak for you. Says, I have a show that I've written in Logic and I've had to be my own music supervisor orchestrator because there's no money involved to properly incentivize additional team members. If I say no, the work doesn't get done, and I feel I stay on the sidelines in terms of what I want to do in musical theater. So anything to say about composers who are orchestrating and music directing, doing, it sounds like it's very similar in the realm of
just jump
wearing
in.
all the hats.
We all have to wear the hats. You know, I think, you know, I mean, as a composer, you know more your music than anyone else, but you know, orchestrating is a real specific work though. So I mean, I would just say, you know, to listen a lot, to try to figure out what style you want to do, and to try to figure out how to orchestrate your style, you know, whatever you're writing. But you know, you got to do it. There's no way around that as a composer.
I'd also add that if you created something in some DAW, Logic, Pro Tools, whatever it is, and you have this big synth string sounding thing, real life, you're probably not going to have 20 string players in your pit to, you know, recreate that. You have to be realistic about what's going to happen and how you're going to recreate that sound. Keyboard's a great thing, but nothing sounds better than a solo cello. You know, it's just, it is what it is. So you have to figure out and be realistic about what it is that you want to do at this level of your production, as opposed to this level, this level, this level. And what is the bare minimum that you can do to recreate your realization of what it is that you hear inside here out to the public. And then how can you expand on that based on your pocketbook?
Love it, love it, love it, love it. We have one last question. This might be one, Joubert, on your end, asking about how Margaret Harris ran her shows. So
Wow.
From Sarah, there's so little about her process. It'd be great to hear more about what you remember of it.
You know, wow. I mean, we're talking about like 1983, but it was Margaret was she was trying to remember how she. I mean, vocally, she, you know, she was old school. I mean, she wasn't a, you know, when I say old school, I mean she wasn't like a real, you know, she wasn't a yeller or, you know, like some people, you know, the very fiery temperament, right? But she was like a no nonsense, you know, get the work done, and I think I saw her get snippy like once or twice, but it was, she had a good command, an amazing command of her conducting technique, and she really knew, she knew what she was doing. And this was it was a show with sort of a gospel flair to it. So she knew how to, I mean, I if I had to compare her with like Linda Twine, I mean, they're both in that vocal level of expertise. I just remember, and then when she got with the orchestra, you know, she was sharp. I mean, it was a great experience. I mean, just a couple of months of 1983, but it was enough for me to remember.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you for sharing. Do we have any last questions from anybody who is here as well? Otherwise, or any last thoughts from the three of you in the last quick fleeting 120 seconds we have? Otherwise, we'll bring we'll bring it home. I know I speak for all of us when I say you know, what a great hour this has been, and really thank you. And it's such an important part of, again, considering this work that needs to continue to be done, and also just how amazing it is, you know, coming from, you know, we're in February, continue, you know, even for the last number of days, this month and every month, right, continue to celebrate the contributions of Black musicians, Black creatives, and you know, and right across the board in terms of that. So thank you three so much for your time. I know I speak for all of us when I say it's been really, really awesome to hear your thoughts. And I know that this has been recorded, this session as well as last week, will be available. I know that's something that we're working on as well. So certainly if you have folks who will want to listen in afterwards, that you know, this will be made available too, which is cool. And Kathy, the last little bit, I know that feel free if you want to jump in and share too, but yeah, a story on Black music directors on Broadway, some interviews. I know Jason was back in here at MJ on Wednesday, I think it was. They were filming something here, so there hopefully is some more stuff on that coming up on CBS too. So keep an eye open for that. Otherwise, thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your Saturday evening. Again, Daryl, Joseph, Zane, thank you so much.
Thank you, Sean.
All right, thank you,
Sean,
man.
for hosting. Fantastic.
Hey, Steve.
Stay safe, y'all, and
All right.
we'll see you soon.